Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got a great episode for you this week, and I hope that the fan running doesn't interrupt anything. At the time of recording this, there's no AC in this house. There hasn't been all summer, and I don't know, it's been supposed to hit 100 degrees in a couple of days. It's been really, really hot. So just bear with me. Happened last year. I don't know. Anyway, this week I'm bringing on a gentleman named Trevor. Trevor is a neuroscientist. This episode's a little bit different than most that I've done. He wants to come on the show and explain like scientific evidence of God through his studies and his work. I'm super excited about it. You know, I'm fully convinced, but for those of you who listen to the show that don't share the same theological beliefs, you know, maybe you just believe in the science more than, you know, faith-based things, or maybe you're looking for gee whiz information, or maybe you're looking for something you can put in your tool belt to speak with someone who doesn't believe, and you could present to them this fact-based evidence. I think it's awesome, and I look so forward to hearing what he has to say. If you have an experience that you'd like to share, holler at me. The email address is thebumppodcast@gmail.com. And let's go ahead. I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get Trevor on the show now. Trevor, thank you again for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And
Well, I appreciate you having me. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. We were talking off air, and you said that you heard me on Justin Brown's show,
Yep.
Prometheus Lens. Yeah, he's a great guy, man. He really is. It's been a minute. I know I don't look like it, like you said. Listening to episodes, it sounds like we talked recently, but it was probably last winter, like November, December, since we talked
Oh,
last.
wow. Okay.
But yeah. Enough about him. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I actually went on his show as well, like maybe like right after your episode came out.
Oh wow.
And so that was kind of this connection. So that's why I reached out to you, because I listened to your episode. I'm like, oh man, how have I not listened to this show before? So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am super interested in what you have today, man. I My accent forbids me from saying neuroscientist the right way. Like it.
You're saying it perfect. Yeah.
But I'm trying. That's a lot of effort. I don't know. I don't know if it comes through. But yeah, when I got your email, I thought, oh, okay, this guy's way over my head. I can't wait to hear him talk.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, hopefully I can deliver. I have kind of a weird background. You know, when people ask me to introduce myself and my specialty and stuff, I I'm not like a, you know, quote unquote classically trained neuroscientist. I actually, you know, I went to undergrad. I did molecular biology, and I was in college like right as the financial collapse was happening.
Oh wow.
And so I'm just looking around like thinking I got to get a job that pays, you know,
Yeah.
and quick, because I need to become independent. People were nervous back then, you know, especially when you're 20 and kind of trying to live on your own. So I was like, could I be a doctor? And I was not super focused or committed back then. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. So what could I do? And back then, medicine, like any medical field, was popular. Like you'd be safe. So I became a physical therapist first, and I didn't like it. Just nothing. It's nothing with the profession. It just didn't fit my personality. I really like daydreaming about things and trying to answer questions, and working with patients is very much like you got to focus on the patient, not looking up at the sky thinking about why we're here, kind of stuff. And so I struggled for a while. I got into healthcare administration. I thought maybe I'd like that. Eventually, I went back to school, and went back to school for my focus was on gene expression, the way cells change as you age, and what are the things you can do about that. I was super interested in like this longevity stuff, and
Yeah.
um, again, though, it kind of just was like, yeah, this is cool, but I don't know if I want to just spend my day obsessed about trying to live another day. And so I was still like, there's something in me saying like, you got to find something to do with your life that like satisfies this desire you have for just pondering things. And I was an atheist. I was an atheist most of my life. And anyway, so I got an opportunity to do what's called a postdoc. It's like doing another PhD after your PhD if you want to do research full time. And I did it in neuroscience
Wow.
in a really impressive lab. I get to do really cool stuff, man. And it's definitely research is my thing. I like trying to figure stuff out like everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
this is kind of what probably most of your guests sort of do. Like even if it's not like credentialed academic research, it's just like you just want to dig into stuff. Like you want to try to figure stuff out, and why does it work this way? And I think that's actually, stop me if I ramble too long, but
Oh no, man, you're good.
I
Yeah.
think that's what got me. I think that's why I sort of became an atheist when I was pretty young. I don't know how young, but um, I grew up in a Midwest town. Everybody I knew pretty much was Catholic. I felt like everyone kind of had this opinion that it's all figured out. And then at the same time, like the Human Genome Project was going on, and Silicon Valley was coding computers. And then we find there's a code inside our cells, and we're going to fix all disease, and we're going to space, we're going to Mars. And I just felt like this is clearly like this is where the curious people go, right? Because
Right.
this is open minded. People are asking questions, and church just felt like, I don't know, like kind of like repressive, like don't ask those kind of complicated questions. I now know that's wrong, like looking back, but that's what I thought as a kid.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe parts of that were true in certain ways, but now, 30 years later, I've realized like a lot of academia, a lot of science, it's just a different religion
Yeah.
with worse answers, you know, and and maybe more hypocritical too. Like there's this insistence that like the institution of science is open-minded, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit. I'm fortunate to have great colleagues, and I think the true researchers on the ground, like doing work in a lab, are open-minded. But some of them, I mean, that's a generalization, but some of them, but somewhere between there and like science advocacy and journalism about science and the political ramifications of science, it turns into this like dogmatic, like you got to be on the team. Um, and so, yeah, for a process of like 3 years, I started questioning that. I had stuff going on in my personal life that had me questioning things. And I started digging into what would become the topic of my book. And it just sort of pushed me over the edge. I'm like, yeah, this is science isn't a worldview. It's a tool, but it's not an explanation in and of
Makes
itself.
sense. What's the name of your book?
So my book is God's Eye View. I thought of this. I was listening to this guy Adam Frank. He's a physicist, but he's kind of he's pretty open minded. He talks about UFOs and stuff, and
Yeah.
uh, he was criticizing this idea in science that there is this base objective reality that would exist even if we weren't here, people, animals. If there's no life in the universe, it would just look the exact same. just without life.
Right.
And it's an insistence on a God's eye view. It's a rational atheist insistence on a God's eye view, right? Just that there is an objective truth, there is an objective reality without conscious agents, without a creator. And it's kind of this weird, like, um paradoxical thing, especially now with what we know about quantum mechanics and stuff. And we can get into that. I think I'm one of these weird people who thinks, because everybody wants you to be on a team. Are you a
Right.
scientist? Are you a Christian? Like, what are you? And I think science is a tool for understanding the things around us. And I think God created those things. So we can use science to kind of, I don't think you can ever prove it, but you can kind of walk right up to that threshold. And then at some point you do just need to make a choice. But um, just real quick on that, I'm actually I'm working on a new book about, I'm not ready to talk about it much, but it's about the Shroud of Turin. And I was talking to
Wow.
one of the researchers who's like the main researcher on the Shroud of Turin. And he ended one of his emails and he said, the thing I love about this relic is that right now all the scientific evidence points to it being real, but you can never prove it. It's like no matter how many studies come out, we're not going to prove it.
Right.
All this, most, I would say almost all the studies at this point agree that it's this 2,000-year old cloth with an image burnt into it by light or radiation that encodes three-dimensional data and looks like we think Jesus would look and matches the resurrection account, the crucifixion account. But he's like, I'll never be able to prove it with 2,000 years in the best technology. And he's like, I like that because it's like God himself. All the evidence will appear in your life,
Yeah.
but at some point you just got to say, I'm never going to know for sure. You just got to kind of take that step.
Amen. And that's
And
where faith comes in, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Not blind faith. Like all the evidence is saying, yes, this is real.
Right.
But at some point you do have to say like, okay, I believe it.
Yeah.
So anyway, kind of got off topic there, but
No, no, I love it. And I know what you're talking about with like the scientific community. I think they that community kind of takes I don't know, they have a little bit of a difficult time with absolutes and definites,
yeah, yeah,
you know, theory all day long. It's kind of like philosophy, it's like
yep,
they like the gray areas, but when there's a definite, and when, like you said, you were around a lot of Catholics who are very absolute and they're very definite,
yeah,
and so you're kind of caught between, for somebody coming up trying to figure it out, you're caught between like two hard lines, and that
yep.
that, that would be rough, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the things that bugged me about church as a kid, or what bugged me about science as an adult. It was like the same criticism. And I'd never read the Bible.
Right.
That's what actually, surprisingly, was not something typically done the few times I went to church, which wasn't often because my parents were kind of like vaguely non-denominational, but we didn't go to church, and they believed in God then and do to this day, but
Right.
it was like a huge part of our lives. And so I never really read any of this stuff. I just assumed it said the stuff that the church people said. But when I read for the first time in my life, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, uh, is it Matthew or Mark, whatever the first book of the Gospels is. When I read it, I'm like, oh, Jesus doesn't like hypocrites either. Like this is the enemy in the gospel are like the kind of dogmatic religious authority. His disciples asked him questions. Like he didn't hate curiosity. He was very much like he was so relatable. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like I was actually kind of shocked. I'm like, why don't they talk about him like this? Like this guy is like speaking truth to power. He's very compelling and interesting. And that was like that first kind of like nick in that last kind of throes of atheism leaving my body. And yeah, so then I'm like, well, what does science actually say? Because maybe science isn't as atheistic as we've been led to believe. Like I was wrong about religion. Maybe I'm this growing mistrust of science I have, and
Right.
maybe there's something there too. And I look into it. I start reading these guys' journals, Heisenberg, Planck, Max Born, even like some of the more biology minded folks like Louis Pasteur. And these guys were mystics. And most of those names I just mentioned were actually Christians, but even those who weren't Christian were very mystical. They did not think they were coming up with an alternative to God. They
Right.
thought they were studying God and his creation. And they have good evidence for why they feel that way. And it's just so funny because like we in science revere these guys like they're the disciple Peter and like that they're the fathers of our church.
Right.
I'm being a little dramatic. It's not that bad, but it's
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Um, but they don't even think what we think now today about science. Like they had a completely different view. And I was just like, oh man, I'm wrong about everything. I just decided I'm wrong about everything. And since then I just became like super like radically open-minded. I went through a phase where maybe I believed too much. Like everything that came along, I'm like, oh, maybe there is this new age idea about XYZ and that, but I think I've kind of settled on there is an objective truth, but it's not going to make itself obvious. You got to do a little digging.
Right. Right. And that's what you've done, right? You've done a little digging. You've probably done a lot of digging.
Oh man, I was obsessed for a while. I mean, I don't know how into the quantum stuff you want to get or just where you want to go, but yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty compelling. Have you ever talked to anybody about the double slit experiment?
No.
Are you
No, I
have you
haven't.
heard it? Have you heard that word before?
I have heard of the double split or
Yeah,
slit
double
experiments.
slit. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not real good at that stuff, man.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean, I could just tell you the conclusion. I don't even. I won't even. We don't have to get into like the nitty gritty stuff.
yeah, man. Yeah.
But basically, I mean, matter like the physical stuff in our world. The conclusion of the one interpretation of the experiment is that if you're not looking at it, it's not really there. And so there, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this. Um, I think the best analogy, and this is the one I use in the book, and I've spoken to other people about, is like a video game analogy. And you got to be careful because this can lead, if you don't think it through, it can lead you to sort of like simulation hypothesis stuff, which who knows, but I don't think that's the right conclusion. You know, um, did you play video games or do you now?
I did. I played them. I'm a little older. I was born in '80, so
Okay.
I grew up with them, but I haven't owned a game system probably since like the late '90s, man.
Well, that's when I would have been playing a lot of video games too. So maybe like let's see, what would that be? Like Legend of Zelda maybe or Mario.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
and so
Mortal
that
Kombat, that kind of
yep, okay, Mortal Kombat, yep. So my I'm gonna use Legend of Zelda because it's kind of like it was like one of the first immersive games I played where you're like in another world,
right,
you know, through a character's eyes. And if you think about what Link, the main character, what his life is like if he was conscious. He's not, right? He's just like an
right,
automaton that you control. But if he was conscious and he's looking at a city or a castle, man, that castle is real, right? He can see it. He knows that if he walked up to it, he could touch it. And then if he turns around and looks at the forest behind him, he's like really confident that that castle is right behind him, you know? But you and I know, since we're outside of his world looking in, that that castle's not really there when he's not looking at it. It's
right,
stored on a hard drive in a computer. It's information, it's zeros and ones. There's no way that Link could conceptualize that, but we know it being
right,
outside of it, right? And when you look at these experiments in quantum physics, they kind of say that that's what the world is like. And listen, people hearing that, there's a million criticisms you could have, and maybe a lot of the criticisms could be addressed with enough time. And I could talk about how they've done the experiments different ways and they've done it at different scales and blah blah blah. But if you just trust me for a minute and believe that the world is like that, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, most physicists have interpreted that to mean, well, either they just rejected. That's kind of a mainstream. It's weird because quantum mechanics is a mainstream theory, but most scientists don't really like thinking or talking about it because it is really strange. But those who have sort of embraced it, it's called the Copenhagen interpretation. They do believe that that's what it's like. Like when you have like this sphere of perception around you where you can see, hear, and touch things,
Right.
and that physically brings them into reality. They don't really exist without you. There's not like this objective reality. And most of them have kind of concluded that, well, maybe we're living in a simulation. Like this is something Elon Musk says famously. And
Yeah.
but my thing is like, what does that mean? You know, who made it?
Right.
If
There's got
that's
to be a
true.
designer. Right.
Right. And I think the simulation hypothesis is just like a atheist way of believing in God. Like you don't want to say the word God, you don't want to use the word creator, you don't want to talk about it. And yeah, I mean that's fine. I guess it doesn't affect me personally, but I don't think that's the right way of looking at it. When you like when you study it, it does seem like there is something special about human consciousness. And in my field, neuroscience, we don't as a group don't believe that. I'd say half the neuroscientists believe that it's an illusion, that there's no such thing. And then half have this really complicated but nonsense theory that it's an emergent property and that we're like a computer.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, that doesn't make sense either. And there's a whole long, complicated reason why that's the case. But I think most people know intuitively that they're in here. Right. And, I'm kind of behind my eyes, between my ears. I'm thinking up words to say. I'm saying them to you. I know you're hearing them
Right.
and you're having your own experience in your head listening.
Absolutely.
And no one science doesn't explain that. And
Right.
so, except it kind of does. There are some theories. And when you hear them, you go, oh, that's the spirit. Like when you hear the theories of how you might be conscious, it's the spirit.
Yeah.
And if we can just go into that next.
Dude, I would love to. But
Okay.
just real quick on the
Yeah.
simulation theory,
Yeah.
are you familiar with David Pilates, the missing 411
Yeah.
guy?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's somewhat like that theory has been introduced even into that.
Oh,
That,
really?
like maybe people have just went, around the bend, but that screen didn't load and they kind of just blinked out. They just went off the map.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
And it's
Man,
weird.
at this point,
It's
I don't
it's
know. At this point, every day, I'm like, all these ideas I used to think were crazy, man. Like, I don't know if they're crazy anymore. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the missing four, so it might kind of fit into what I'm about to say next. So, this idea that matter is not really there unless you look at it or hear it or touch it, that it's called superposition. It's the idea that like matter behaves more like energy and it's sort of everywhere all at once, or it's information or something. And we don't know the right words to use. That's called superposition. There's this other idea called entanglement, which
Mhm.
is that particles that are created together can be entangled so that no matter where they are in the universe, they're mirror images of each other, essentially.
Right.
And so, like a particle of light, if one is in an upspin, it's like rotating clockwise, let's say, then the other, the partner, even if it's a million miles away, 100 million miles away, it's in a downspin. And if I change the particle on my end and push it down, the other one goes up.
Hmm.
And so it's like a mirror. This is an incredible idea because it could represent information transfer across any distance, right? And so when psychologists were first trying to explain human consciousness, they had this idea called transmission theory. And it's considered pseudoscience and made up today, but this is what Nikola Tesla believed. He had a quote about, somewhere in the universe is a core that I haven't perceived, and my brain is just an antenna for that signal, right? And that's not the exact quote, but it's something like that. But the pushback, the skeptical pushback is, well, what's the signal? We know radio waves, we know light and radiation. We know everything there is to know about the way the world works. And if we can put all those detectors around your head and there's nothing going in or out. And so that's when production or generation theory popped up, which is that you make consciousness in your head. Quantum entanglement changes that. There's a potential if we could just find the antenna, right? Which I think we have, but if we could just find the antenna, if it is capable of quantum resonance or entanglement, or we're just guessing, but if we can show it's capable of that, then we found our antenna. And maybe there is a source somewhere that this comes from. So think about this. I'll just tell you right now that there are new theories. The theory is that there are these quantum fields that we tap into with this antenna, right? And they animate our body. Man, is that not, how would you explain that to someone 2,000 years ago? You would say the spirit animates the flesh. That's
Yeah.
the only way you could say. Like, you're not going to talk about quantum resonance and all
Right.
this. And so some people hear that and they think I'm trying to like explain away the spirit. I'm like, no, 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 no. To me, that proves it exists. Like, I think that's like, that excites me as a Christian. But sometimes I do think people are so used to science attacking them that they just assume like I'm trying to say, well, there's no such thing as a spirit. It's a quantum field. No, like that's not what I'm saying. These are just words. Um, I think spirit is the way to describe it. And so you there's this guy, Stuart Hameroff. He's an anesthesiologist. He's shown that these structures inside, they're in all of your cells. They're in all cells, period. But they're really complicated in your neurons. They're called microtubules.
Hmm.
And he kind of, this is an analogy that isn't perfect, but it's reasonable. He kind of likens them to guitar strings. They resonate, and the length of the tube that's able to resonate, it can change based on the proteins that are bound to it. And so I was just talking about this the other day with Mark from my family thinks I'm crazy.
Yep.
I was talking to him about if he knows how a radio receiver works, and he I just learned this, and he didn't know either. You might know, but what I learned, and hopefully this is right, is to like picture a copper wire that's like, let's say 6 inches long. You can change the length of the copper wire with a knob. If you turn the knob one way, the copper wire gets shorter. If you turn it the other way, it gets longer. And it's going to pick up radio waves that have that wavelength.
Okay.
Okay. So literally, like picture a wave, the
Right.
distance between two peaks of that wave, if it matches the length of the copper wire, your speaker plays that song. And so you can literally just changing it a tiny bit, get a completely different
Right.
signal, right? And that is kind of what these tubes in your neurons look like. They resonate with the quantum field, and you can change the length of the resonance. And so this guy, Stuart Hameroff, who's a genius, no doubt about it. I don't think he's particularly religious. I don't know. I don't know how you come up with this theory and not believe in God immediately, but he's kind of putting forward this idea that it is like we're kind of tuning in to this, what I would call spirit.
Right.
And that explains a lot of different things. That explains like psychedelics potentially, because they most likely act on microtubules. It explains consciousness. It could explain why dreams feel different than waking life. I mean, it could explain a lot of different things.
Even prayer or
Yes.
or fasting.
Yes.
A lot of
Yes.
things would affect that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you close your mind off to this crazy world. You close your eyes, you go into your room, you pray to your Father unseen, right?
Right.
And we know prayer changes the brain.
Right.
And so, yeah, why couldn't we be modifying like the signal we're tapped into? Maybe we're tapped into that higher level signal and it makes us feel better and it's nice. And maybe that's why we need to go to sleep every night, because we kind of need to go back to that other place like once a day, um, out of body experiences, NDEs, all this stuff. I love it. I'm fascinated by it.
That
And
is that's very interesting, man. Like that goes into the whole thing about frequencies, and
yep,
different hertz, to have different, it's all resonance, right?
yep,
Uh,
yep. As soon as you start using the words vibration and resonance and frequency, like my colleagues are like, "Oh, goodness gracious!" But they're
yeah.
real things. They're real. They mean something in science. Like a frequency has a scientific meaning. It's not like automatically crazy. Yeah, and anyway, so to me, like that's nice because this whole idea that we don't have free will,
Mhm.
consciousness is an illusion, we're just machines that evolved this sense of being inside our body to sort of like make our life feel more meaningful. So we try to stay alive, I guess. I mean, what a nihilistic, horrible way of conceptualizing what life is.
Right.
It's almost like the most evil thing you could come up with. Like, how could we demoralize people more?
Right.
I don't know. I just don't buy it.
No.
And I was skeptical of it, but I believed it when I was an atheist because I couldn't explain like the scientific, I couldn't come up with even a potential mechanism. But when you look into quantum mechanics, that's the focus of the book, like how does quantum mechanics make it possible to have a soul? Um, it's totally possible. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying it's possible, and
Right.
so I can't just rule it out. And it's almost a better explanation.
Love it.
Um, yeah. Anyway, so,
Yeah.
uh, there's this guy Robert Epstein, no relation to the other famous
Yeah.
Epstein, but
That guy.
he's I think he might be an atheist too. I don't know. It's so funny to me. You know what it is? It's you're trying to fill, you've got this hole in you, right? Like you're trying to, it's wrong. This nihilistic worldview is terrible and it can't be right. So a lot of the best scientific theories for this stuff do come from atheists because they're trying to explain God. They just can't take that like final step, which I
Yeah.
think I was for some reason was able to take, which is, oh, he's real,
Amen.
but his thing was and this is the kind of work I do. I do fMRI research. You can put someone in a machine and you can spin a giant magnet around their head super fast. And you can measure subtle small changes in oxygen. And so neurons use oxygen. And so if there's an if there's a depletion or an uptick in oxygen, that means something. It means like that part of the brain is doing something. So we can put somebody in an MRI and we can say, tap your finger and it's going to light up. So if I'm tapping like my right middle finger, it's going to light up on the left side, right, sort of in the middle. And but it's interesting. I can make it more complicated. I can say tap your finger to the rhythm of your favorite song, and
Right.
now your cerebellum lights up because that's like rhythm, like coordination, rhythmicity,
Right.
and
But
maybe a little memory center. Go ahead.
that's so crazy because the song's not there. I
That's the
mean,
point. Yes, that's it, man. Because no matter how much you zoom in, there's no song there, right? And that's his whole point. That man, yes, that's it. Robert Epstein's whole point is like, no matter what you do, you cannot find that memory.
right.
And so maybe it's not, we know the hippocampus and memory are like obviously the hippocampus is involved in memory. But
Right.
our assumption is like a computer, it's stored there. And listen, I'm not saying it's not possible. If memory was stored in your hippocampus, that would not shake my understanding, my faith at all, right? Because the body exists, the brain is important. I'm not saying the brain doesn't do anything. Of course it does. I don't think it explains the experience of being alive and being in a body, but I know it does almost every other single thing. So it wouldn't shake my foundations. But it's also possible that maybe it is more like an antenna and that it is sort of receiving this stuff from somewhere else. And he uses this to explain all sorts of things like terminal lucidity. Have you heard of that term, paradoxal or terminal lucidity? There's this idea that people who should have like no brain function, like people, there's case reports of people who have like 90% of their brain missing or advanced dementia, all of a sudden before death, just having perfect clarity, speaking to their family they haven't spoken in 30 years.
I know a case of that.
Really?
Yeah.
It's really common in dementia.
Um, yeah, there's a guy I'm close friends with, and I might be slightly off with it, but he was telling me about the final moments of his father before he passed. And this guy, um, he was literally on his deathbed. He was at home. He decided that's where he wanted to pass at. And I guess there was absolutely nothing. He was at the point where there was no consciousness or whatever, you know.
Right.
But in the final seconds, he said he opened his eyes and looked at him and smiled, you know. And he said, and when he smiled at him, he said even his features looked younger, you know. It was like it
Mm,
was just like it goes beyond clarity, I guess. It was
yeah.
almost supernatural. But then he went to sleep, you know. That was it. But
Wow. Like a realization or something, or just like a peace or a happiness. Man, you gave me the chills a little bit on that. It's how do you explain that if the structure of the brain determines everything,
right,
right? Because if a decay in the structure of the brain caused him to get like that, well, he didn't regain brain structure those last 10 minutes.
right.
And there's extreme cases where people are like conversing fluently right before they die, and
Wow.
it's like you just I think science they're trying to come up with any theory other than consciousness is distinct from the brain or comes from somewhere else, but that's at least got to be on the table. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard it try to be explained like it's some kind of whatever chemicals or fluids in there are just kind of dumped,
Yeah,
like it just purges, and I guess it hits the right receptors to make something. You know,
maybe. No,
I
could be.
don't
I
know.
mean, it could be. Again, this is not like one of those things that would shake my foundations. It's like another one of the long list of things that we don't have an answer to that could be explained by consciousness. I mean, I just refuse. and I just and I think you can make the case logically too, but I refuse to believe that we are not agents inside our body with free will.
Right,
And and that requires something other than chemistry and neuronal complexity. It requires something else. I mean, this is not like a crazy idea. Nobel Prize winners have advocated for this, that math and computation cannot create the human experience. It can create almost everything else. It can create the illusion of being human, like AI. We live in a time of that. It can predict the way a human might act in a certain situation, but it cannot explain the experience of being in your body. It can't. No matter how perfect we ever design a robot, I just know if I could get inside of its head, it's not experiencing life the same way I am, because
I,
there's not even a mechanism for it.
yeah. There's no way for it to even be like there's just no way for it to have awareness. You know, you could.
Yeah,
It all comes down to a program to where you could ask the question and it could tell you some kind of big in-depth philosophical,
sure.
you know, rhetoric, but it's not experiencing life. You know, it's not
Yes.
feeling physical pain. It's not, or regret. You know,
Right.
where does that stuff come from? You know, guilt. Um,
It is not aware. People dismiss self-awareness like it's not a big deal. It's a big deal. It is the deal,
yeah, it's the deal. Yeah,
like intelligence is not the big deal. Even emotion is not the big deal. Even fundamental things like memory. I mean, these are all critical to being human. Don't get me wrong, but it's the awareness of those things.
yeah,
It's the fact that you can feel them. Like you can think of a memory, you can picture it, but it's different from actually seeing it, right? It's like it can't be described with scientific vocabulary. It is like this. It's a spiritual phenomenon, and people's so the technique that science has kind of deployed, which is like almost I don't get. It's like vicious. I don't understand it, but the technique is, well, I can show you where in your brain you felt afraid. Therefore, you are just a machine because fear is made right here. And I can show you sadness right here and love right here because that part of your brain is using oxygen. And if you are schizophrenic and this part of your brain changes like this, you're going to see things, right? And I just feel like it misses the point. I'm not arguing that the brain is not important. I'm not arguing that there aren't centers in your brain related to sadness or memory. or
Right.
even that if your brain structure changes, that you could become schizophrenic or bipolar or blah, blah, blah. It's just who's experiencing that? Who's experiencing the hallucination, right? Who's
Right.
experienced the sadness? Who's experienced the anger? Um, you even when describing it to me told me that I would see hallucinations if my brain looked like this. Who's I? Right.
There you go.
And it's weird, man. So there's this guy named Robert Sapolsky. If I could tell another kind of
Yeah.
story, he's maybe the guy. I admire him. He's a genius. Like I can admire people who disagree with me, but he is a genius. And the last, I'd say, like 15 years of his life has been dedicated to proving that there's no such thing as free will. And he kind of uses clumsy analogies and stuff, in my opinion. Not to criticize him too much, but he'll say, like, he talks about this thing called the hungry judge effect. And it's that one of the strongest predictors of how long you'll be sentenced to prison is how long it's been since the judge last ate.
Mm.
So basically, if he's really hungry, you're more likely to go to prison for a longer duration. And he's like, so clearly it's just all biology. There's no free will. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, who's hungry? You know, like he's hungry. This agent inside his body is hungry. I'm like, it, you don't disprove free will by proving that I'm a biological being. I know I am. The Bible says we are. The Bible says we're
Right.
flesh and spirit, right? Like
Right.
you're showing me that hunger makes me grumpy doesn't prove anything to me.
Right.
And I'm like, how can someone so smart be so illogical on this one issue? And I was watching an interview he did with Neil deGrasse Tyson, another one of these guys. Although lately he's been acting a little
Yeah. He's
more.
been
He might be coming around. I don't know, but
softening up, ain't
I'd have to take back a lot of mean things I said about him. Uh,
he?
but he's interviewing this guy, Robert Sapolsky, and Robert Sapolsky's talking about his childhood. And he doesn't give specifics, but he says, when I was 14, I experienced horrible religious trauma, at the hands of somebody I trusted that should have been there for me. I don't know. That can mean a lot of different things. Um, and right then and there, I knew there was no such thing as God and that free will was an illusion. I'm like, dude, you're giving it away, man. Like
Yeah.
this is the worst kind of confirmation bias that you criticize believers for. That believers just look at life and say everything they see proves God to them, right? And
Right.
they ignore the stuff that hurts their argument. They only pay attention to the stuff that helps their.
Yeah.
Atheists do the exact same thing
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That's what I honestly, I think at the end of the day, there are people maybe that have some kind of narcissistic thing going on that can maybe they'll get a pass for saying they don't believe in God. But I I think when it comes down to it, there's not really an atheist
Yes.
out there. You know,
Yep.
like there's the old saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole,
Yep.
you know. But I
You're saying
like
there's no atheist anywhere, and I agree.
yeah, anywhere because and it's not even like your religion is science. It's that everybody I everybody that has the ability for cognitive function at some point has questions, you know,
Absolutely.
and their answers are shaped through experience, right? So it doesn't matter what grandma or grandpa tell them, they have to have their own experience at some
Yep.
point.
Yep.
And when that experience they have that they measure the validity of God or to get a confirmation of God, when it's trauma,
Yep.
it's not that they don't believe in God or even a higher power or whatever. It's that they're angry. They
Yep.
feel
Resentful.
um, yeah, it's resentment. It's some kind of egocentric position to where why would God let that happen to me
Exactly.
when to me it's not about me. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Exactly. I've had moments like that. Trust
Yeah,
me.
I think we all have had those moments of why or is he really there? You know?
But my hope for those people and for myself is that you look like I don't know why that happened. and maybe the whole point is for this stuff to happen to me, and that I was made a free agent, and this is a test. We're going to see where I come down on this side of the question, you know.
Right.
And there's been, I look back in my life, there's been objectively bad things that have happened that
Right.
I'm now grateful for. And so I try to not, you know, like whatever happened to Robert. I mean, I hope, I don't know. I'm sure there are some things that are so horrible I could never try to come up with a
Right.
rational, you know, like leukemia in a child. I don't get it. That's over. I don't feel like I have to have an explanation for why that happens.
Right.
Um, Maybe some things are random. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, obviously, God created a world and put us in it and gave us free will, and so evil can exist, but maybe just bad luck can exist too. I don't know. I don't have like a theological basis for saying that, but I do know that what you just said is correct. That he is maybe placing faith in himself, or that he's just angry with God and really still believes, but he's trying to like work his way around it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It-
But um I I went through a period of like wanting to argue with people like that, and now I just very much like hope that it works out for them, you know.
yeah,
Because
bro.
I mean I was that person once too, so I can't be too critical of them, but it is not a happy place to be, I don't think.
Right. Right. Well, it goes back to that nihilism, that nothing matters kind of view. That's that's depressing, and that opens the door for depression.
I
You know what I mean?
I don't think people can really believe it deep down though, because if
No.
life like really, if if there is not a God, then life really does not matter, and there really is. I would want to be careful what I say. I don't want to make people who are atheists like depressed, but there really is no reason to get up the next day, but yet they do. So they gotta believe in something. It's just they've buried it deep, deep, deep down,
Yeah.
and they're resentful, like you said. There's this like one of the most famous atheist debaters, Christopher Hitchens. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah.
He's a British guy, super intelligent. There's parts of him I admire, you know. He's ruthless though. He's
Right.
just horribly ruthless debating religious people. Um, he has a comment that if there's one thing that gives him pause, it's why is there something rather than nothing? And yeah, it should. It
Yeah.
should give pause. Like that is like the question, man. If it's all meaningless, then what's the point of it even being here? The universe could just as easily be an empty black void. That's what most of space is anyway.
Right.
So
Yeah.
why is there something rather than nothing? And also to be an atheist, you got to believe in like six miracles. This is kind of like a cliche religious talking point, but it's true. You know, you got to believe that all matter and energy in the universe exploded from a single pinprick without cause.
Hmm.
That's not a small miracle to believe in, right?
Right.
That's a big miracle to believe. I
Yeah.
mean, and there's a Terrence McKenna quote. I forget how it goes exactly, but basically, like the difference between atheism and Christianity is that atheism um, needs you to believe in one miracle and then it can explain everything else, right? But it's actually not true. There's many miracles. You know, life from non-life. Um, how can we understand? Like, how are we able to rationalize the world with minds that appeared at random? It doesn't make a ton of sense.
It
Why
doesn't.
is the universe fine-tuned perfectly, where you know gravity is the right fraction of the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force and electromagnetism, and I'm
Yeah.
rambling, but I think people get my point.
Yeah, I totally get
It's,
it.
yeah,
I got another one. Like, what about your moral code?
right.
Unless it comes down, if I think on it really, really hard, like, would morals be like from an atheistic view, just some kind of self-fulfilling thing? Do we have morals so we feel like we're important, or we feel like we're good people? But what is good? You
Yeah.
know, like where do morals even come from? Where does this agreement to not, you know, rape
I
and
think
pillage come from?
I
You
think
know,
atheists feel pretty good about their arguments on that point, and I don't think they should, because I know I did. I know when I explained it to myself and to, like in college, like arguing with people because I was a complete jerk. Just on that one issue. I felt like I was a nice guy overall, but I was like resentful. I was resentful. I don't even know why in hindsight, but anyway, my point would be like, well, it makes sense if you're in a tribe. If you just start killing everybody, your genes aren't going to get passed on. Their genes aren't going to get passed on. The society's going to collapse, whatever, whatever, whatever. But if if the universe really is meaninless,
what would
why does
you?
that matter? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
there should
what's the point in procreation?
right yeah, exactly like then it should have, I don't know, it should have. There is no objectively good morals without a lawgiver. It's like everybody wants to believe that the laws are good, but there was no legislature that put the
Yeah.
laws together, and everyone wants to believe that. I don't know, it I don't want to be like someone who relies too much on like religious ideas to make a point. Like I think you can make the point with science, and that's what the book is, but more and more it does just feel like the spiritual explanation is maybe even the better one. Like uh I don't know. I don't know. It's I mostly work with and interact with people who are probably somewhere between atheism and agnosticism.
Yeah.
So I do kind of always feel like so when I get around somebody who he agrees with me, I kind of rant a little bit. But I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, there are a lot less like out and out atheists nowadays.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of agnostics, but
Yeah.
it's like rare that I'm like I will meet someone who's like open about the fact that they are an atheist.
Right. Yeah.
When I was 20, everybody was an atheist.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those days are kind of we're in an odd time with that. Um, I I'm actually a teacher at at our local high school here. I
Oh,
teach
so
a
you've got a good sample. Like you could give us good data. Okay.
dude. I would say like there is a large number of these Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever you want to call them right now. You know, the 15 to 18-year-old kids that are in love with the Lord.
No, that's
And
awesome.
it's not to be like, well, I'm gonna go to prayer club because my friend's going. It's
Right.
like, hey, Mr. Kennedy, do you have a minute? And just sitting down and just wanting to talk about, the Bible or talk about Jesus. They have questions. They come looking, and it is impressive.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, so I think there's maybe it's just regionally, maybe here in Appalachia. I don't know, but it
I don't
seems
think
like
so.
there's more of a resurgence than
Yeah.
there is this, the falling away. Um,
Well, I'm talking to you from Gamora V2, Los Angeles, and I notice it here for sure. I mean, it's still, of course, it's LA, and I'm sure it's much different than where you are, but
yeah,
as a ratio, I would say I notice it as well.
that's wonderful, man. That's
How
wonderful. And
how do you explain that, man? I mean, maybe it's just culture, but I don't know. I don't think so.
you know, here we just say the Lord's moving. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, uh, you said you don't want to lean too heavy on like just the religious text when you're talking to these people, that might be coming from a more scientific
Exactly.
approach or
Yep.
mindset. And I totally get that. And we are warned that that's going to happen, that we're going to appear foolish, to those that think of themselves as wise, you
Yeah.
know, and
Exactly.
that's the thing,
And
and
is that the actual quote right there that you just
it
said?
is. Hold on, let me see. I'll find it.
I'm still like a total biblical like neophyte. I've read the Gospels and I need to read more.
Let me see.
While you're looking that up, if I'll
Yeah,
just
man.
say, sometimes I wonder if I maybe kind of censor myself a little bit too much in personal conversations, because the few times that I do kind of let it show that I have these ideas, I do find a lot of people are like, I'm surprised sometimes by how receptive people are. Like, I feel like maybe they're waiting to talk about this topic too, you know?
Well,
Not always, but
well, you know, that's the thing. Really smart people feel goofy. You know,
yeah,
really smart people feel goofy to say that there's a God
right.
or that they can go all in with faith.
Yep.
Um, it's awkward. It's hard. What if they're
And
wrong? You
And if you're
know,
like me, where you've been, uh, not to make people hate me, but like I would mock people who felt that way. So now I kind of feel like a hypocrite. Like I'm kind of backtracking on the way I used to feel. But I mean, I got over that a year ago. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an ego thing, maybe. I
yeah.
don't mean that in a mean way, but it's a humility thing. Like you got to just admit you're totally wrong about everything and beg for forgiveness.
Blessed are the meek and humble, right? Right. Yeah, it's in First Corinthians, I think, what I'm looking for, man. It's in let's see, First Corinthians chapter 1. Um, it quotes the Old Testament here in verse 19. It says, "For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside." Verse 20, it says, "Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has God has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world?"
Mm.
It goes on. I
I
think
love
it's
that it even uses the word debate. That's
oh yeah.
that's
And verse 27 says, "But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong." And I think there's more. There's much more about you know what appears
that's
foolish.
cool.
So
It
yeah,
is
man. So
all it's all humility.
yeah, so if they think they got you, that you're in this gotcha moment, like, well, prove it, prove it. You'd be like, it's okay to say faith. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Because they'll think that's ridiculous, but that's what God wants. He wants our faith. Who cares
exactly.
what they think about us? We're pleasing Him. We're pleasing
when
Him.
when I when I managed to sneak this book into like a pretty atheist person's life and trick them into reading it, one of the one of the immediate put all the pushbacks about religion, it's like not about God actually or Jesus. It's about this thing the church did or this interpretation or like a political ramification of faith. And there is one actual argument like that actually comes out of the Bible that I hear and I'm like, I used to feel that way too. And it's about like why, man, this goes right to like original sin, I guess. It's like why would I don't know, you tell me. My kind of interpretation of like Lucifer and the fall and then the fall of man is all about like somebody thinks they know better. Like someone wants to make the decision themselves and like be in charge of their destiny or their life, or they feel like it's not fair that they have these limitations imposed on them, or even like the fruit is called the knowledge of good and evil. And why wouldn't you want someone to have knowledge of good and evil? Like wouldn't you want them to have that? And it wasn't until I started thinking about it till I had kids, and I'm like, oh, like I get it. Like I don't necessarily want my kids to have absolute freedom. Like freedom is good, and free will. Thank you. I,
Right.
I appreciate free will. Thank you, Father. But um, there, when I start thinking about it that way, like a father and a child, I'm like, okay, you know, and I don't think people want to be patronized like that. I think if they don't have, if they're lacking humility, they don't want to think about their being like maybe they got a problem with their parents. I don't know. Like they just don't want to be patronized. And
Yeah.
I think people got to try to get over that. I
Yeah.
think
I
that's
mean, what
yeah.
what's the opposite of humility? It's pride, you know,
Yep.
and pride is what brought Lucifer down. You know,
Yep.
he saw how beautiful he was,
Yeah.
and he said he's going to be as God. You know, he thought for sure that he could run the show. You know, that he was going to be up there with God. I think it's in Ezekiel.
Wow.
Um,
I I wish I could remember who it was at some point in my life who basically said to me like I don't even remember, but something to the effect like to be an atheist means like you think you're God.
yes,
And I was
yes,
like, that's ridiculous. No, it doesn't. Like I was like, what are you talking about? I don't think I don't walk around like I don't stink, you know. I've got insecurities, I've got problems, but no, that's exactly correct. Like it's a pattern of exactly what happened to Lucifer. It's like I know best. Why would God do these things? He can't be like it's like a petulant kid.
like he has to answer to you, right?
Exactly.
And
Right.
that's
Yes.
like that's what the that's what the inner Bo wants to say to somebody when they go, "Why does God let this happen or that?" I'm like, "Who are you?"
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's what I want to say, but at the same time, you can't hurt people, you know. So it's like you might try to find a better or a softer way to get around to who are you,
But
you know?
that's it. Like that's important. I was listening to Wes Huff. I hate mentioning names because everyone has opinions about people, but
That's
he
all right.
said things that helped convince me that God is real. So I give him whatever, whatever
Yeah.
weird doctrinal differences people have. But he was on a big podcast and the guy's like Buddhist Hindu. He's Hindu. And he was like doing that. Like, why would God do this? Why would God do that? And he did make the comment, like, listen, God doesn't owe you anything. Like
Right.
he didn't have to make you, you know? So even if he ignores you the rest of your life and treats you terribly, like he did you this huge favor, right? So
Right.
so so like if a tsunami wipes out a city, like I get it. I get like why do bad things happen and why is there evil in the world? Like, yes, I get it, but like none of this even needs to be here, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's.
Yeah.
I normally don't ramble about religious. I normally try to stick to science, but I think it's all related, man. I don't know.
It is related. I love it. And going way back, you know, I forgot to even write down notes as we're talking, man. But I've been so pulled into this conversation. It's like
Me too, man. Thank you.
um, going way back, talking about how the brain is like an antenna, and you're dialing in. You know, the thing that come to my mind, and what is a mind, right? The thing that came
Yep.
to my mind was like maybe that's what the Bible speaks of when it talks about to always walk in the Spirit.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I like that.
like you.
Because the brain is a real thing. Like it does your personality is in there somewhere. It does stuff, but it doesn't, it's not everything. And so I think scientists kind of accuse religious believers of thinking like it's all spiritual.
Right.
No, that's not what I think. I think it's a body. I think it's a spirit, and I think they can exist kind of in different ratios. The body can exist maybe not completely without the spirit, but
Right.
without a lot of it. And we are kind of like self-contained biological machines. We could kind of function like nihilistic robots, but I don't think we have to. And what you just said, like walking in the spirit, I like that. You're dialed in, literally, like
Yes.
to the right frequency.
It's on your favorite station, man.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
And
nothing but
sometimes we go through a period we're listening to maybe a little too much metal, but then we bring it back.
yeah. maybe, maybe there's a sad song we want to hear for a little while. Yeah.
How are we on doing on time? Are we good?
I'm good, man. Just whatever's good for you, bro.
I
Um,
I want I wasn't gonna talk about it, but if we could talk about the shroud a little. I don't know. Are you
oh
interested in the topic? Okay.
yeah, man.
Okay.
Yes. I want to hear everything you know about the Shroud of Turin. You kidding me?
What have you heard? Like what's your because what I had heard is that in the 80s, I didn't know the exact year, but it was
Mhm.
proven to be only 700 years old.
Yeah, carbon dating stuff.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I Well, I'll have you know, it's weird. Um, I'm not a very science based guy at this point in my life.
Yeah, you don't need to
Uh,
be.
I have
Yeah.
suspended belief in most scientific
Yep.
findings and facts. So carbon dating, I'm not too impressed by it. But the shroud, what I've heard as of late is that is bloodstains, right?
Mhm.
Um, it is, you kind of touched on it, that it's like an impression or
Yes.
like almost like a negative imprint
Yep. Not
from,
almost. It is a negative imprint. Yep.
yes,
Yep.
from like superheated, some kind of something that the human body shouldn't be able to do,
Yep.
um, to cast this image onto the shroud. Um, that it hits the right dimensions, the 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 scars and the stripes, the the nails, all the wounds are in the right places. Um,
You're so you're onto this topic. I can tell. You're paying
yeah,
attention. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's um okay. So first part of the conversation over. Please go sneak my book into some agnostic's life if you know them. I think you might be able to. I think you might be not a full on atheist. They'll hate it, but someone who's like maybe borderline. Sneak God's eye view into their life. Okay, God's eye view is gone. Shroud of Turin time.
Hey, hold
Uh,
up. Where could they
yeah.
get God's eye view?
Oh, Amazon. Just Amazon. God's eye view. I'm a terrible marketer. There's like 4 books called God's eye view. Mine normally shows up first. My name's Trevor, and there's a big black hole on the cover. Okay.